pee or just talk at the same time. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Good.
Good.
So on Enneagram Adventure today, we're going to talk about twos, and that should be exciting for a couple reasons. One, we're going to talk about twos, but also you're a two.
I am. I'm
So
nervous.
if you're nervous,
Yeah, I'm nervous.
we're gonna have all the like first-hand account
I
of
know.
the motivation of a two.
Yeah, it's
So
it's interesting for sure. I think it'll be exciting. I'll have some stories around my two-ness and how it shows up, how it came to be, kind of a bit of all of those things that are all wrapped up in the behaviors that Holly gets to see on a very regular basis. Good,
no
bad, ugly.
judgment though. No judgment. No judgment.
We
We all
listen
have
and
our
we don't
things.
judge.
Right.
Oh,
Oh man.
yeah. It's gonna be a good one though. I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
an
So
excited nervous.
yes. So before we jump into all things two, just for anybody who's new here, which is probably everyone, because this is episode 3 for us. This is Tana and I's podcast called Enneagram Adventure, where we really dive into the different parts of the Enneagram. Tana and I are both certified Enneagram coaches through the Integrative 9 and that kind of assessment for coaching, personal growth, that sort of things. Tana, is there anything you'd add before we jump into all things Enneagram 2?
No, just a reminder to follow along. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, follow, subscribe, all the things so you don't forget about us. We'll stay fresh in your mind.
Right. Okay, so Enneagram 2s. I definitely want to hear all of your firsthand account, but
Yeah.
before we jump into your personal two-ness, for anybody who's not familiar, the Enneagram type 2 is often referred to as the considerate helper, sometimes the befriender, and is really driven. The motivation for the two is really comes from this place of, I need to be helpful in order to
Mhm.
be cared for and loved. Is there anything you would like the basics of Enneagram 2?
I think just a couple of reminders about twos because I think when I don't know about you, but when I hear people talking about what they could be potentially, a lot of people think that they're a two. And that could be for a variety of reasons, right? I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, my mom's definitely a two."
Yeah.
And just a fresh reminder, I think I'll remind this in every episode, but it's about motivation and not behavior. And uh, so I think that's a key distinguishing factor that we'll hit on in every episode. Um, but that was a big learning curve for me too when I had just found out what my number was and was like, no, no. But it makes complete sense. I 100% resonate with my number. If you do a full Enneagram assessment, it makes even more sense to see your second highest number and your third highest number and how that can relate to some of the behaviors. But at the end of the day, that core motivation. The one thing I would also call out about motivation for two is this feeling of a fear of abandonment. So it's pretty integrated into most twos that I know and where I see most of behavior stemming from in the twos in my life. We have a lot of twos. I have a lot of twos in my life, but collectively, both of us
Lookably.
have
Yes.
a lot of twos.
Yeah. There is some Enneagram theory out, and we could dive into this much later, but just as a note about how within the Enneagram, how fives and twos, while they're not opposite on a line and are not connected in any way, there's like a lot of sort of opposite energy there. And so it does kind of go back to this idea of opposite attraction, maybe, because
Right.
I do have a lot of twos in my life, both personal life in friendships, but then also in our work life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you were to think about the key characteristics of the two that you really feel like come up for you, what would they be?
Uh, Considerate helper as a title is pretty strong with me in my two-ness. And that's both positive and negative, right? Where we're always, the first person to raise their hand to say, "Oh, how can I help with that? What can I do? What can I, how can I make your life easier?" Um, However, we oftentimes try to anticipate what people need or want help with or need fixing of, and we are not always right when it comes to that. So that's one of the key characteristics for me of truly the helper. One other thing is this notion around selflessness and forgetting about your own problems.
Oh, yeah, you definitely do that.
I do that. Not probably. It's to a fault because my problems aren't as big as that other person's problems or the problems in the world or the state of the world or uh so my big excuse that I have is first world problems.
Yeah. Yes. It's to that, of course, but we don't want to minimize
Yeah.
anybody's experience.
Yeah. And so it's just being comfortable with the fact that I have needs, right? Needs and problems, meaning sometimes the same thing. Um, but I will usually put myself last. Now, I would say the other thing for me in my two-ness that shows up more at home than at work is I will get resentful if I perceive that I'm giving and giving and giving and that's not being appreciated or it's not being reciprocated.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where my, resentment or passive aggressive behavior will come out. So there's that piece of my two-ness that's probably the biggest pieces. And then there's these little like rivers that stem off of that, little micro behaviors that ultimately lead back to, you know, I need to feel helpful. I will get love if I am helpful. I will feel, validated if I am doing for others and not myself, putting myself last. There's
Right.
reward in that. That's like at my core. That's really deep.
Be really beautiful, but also can be, you know, detrimental.
Mm.
Yeah.
In a really unhealthy way, if I'm really forgetting about myself, it will sometimes even manifest in when I do think that I'm going to do something for myself, I'll misplace what I even need to be doing. Where like, oh, I need to get out of the house. Like, I'll go have a drink with a friend.
Yeah.
When in reality, I probably just need time by myself.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, something to conserve my energy a little bit more rather than, "How can I kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Oh, I haven't seen that person in a long time. I wanna make sure everything's okay." So, I think that I've done a lot of work since getting certified. The how do my behaviors manifest in a healthy and unhealthy way? And that's been, while wildly uncomfortable, eye-opening, cringeworthy to look at myself and be like, "Oh my god." But so worth it because it gets more and more comfortable, and
Yeah.
it gets you more settled is the way that I feel, is just more
Yeah.
settled in the gifts and the areas of opportunity. It's my number. But I would say on the
Sure.
gift side, one thing that I find that's translated in my two-ness is it shows up as gratitude in a way that is like, "Wow, I'm so appreciative that I have all these people in my life. Wow, I'm so appreciative that I have this, that, and the other thing. My beautiful children, an amazing husband." Like, there's this gratitude in other people and what that does for me
Yeah.
that has even become more clear since learning my number.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. There are so many gifts that the two brings. One, they have, and you have this, other twos that I have in my life have this ability to sort of recognize when somebody's feeling maybe down or excluded or in need of some sort of connection. And twos have this ability to like zero in on that and be like, let me bring you in. Let me hold this space for you. How can I help you? And I think that's a really amazing gift. There'll be other numbers as we talk about later on that don't have that same gift. They have other gifts, but that one is one that I think is exceptional for twos. And I think they show up and love, like the twos in my life show up and love really hard, right? Like they would give you everything they have to give.
Yeah.
If they could. And so I think that's amazing. But I want to talk a little bit about how you think this was sort of created for you in terms of what was it in your childhood that sort of validated this? Oh, in my family structure, being helpful was how I got taken care of.
Yeah, I think I can remember the most praise that I ever got as a kid is when I was being helpful, or like that's how I would get affection in my household. The other thing that I think is really interesting about how that was created for me is not only was it validated, but it was almost instructed of like, you will put others before
Yeah.
yourself. And I think, as most parents do, myself included, did the best with what they had, right? I think that no situation is perfect, but I had to really figure out how to maneuver environments growing up where I couldn't be the biggest voice in the room because we had other things going on. And so it was like, how do I walk into the room, read the situation, and figure out how to create a space for myself that I'm not a burden in all of this, right? I will say that in my two-ness, I have a lot of really big feelings and I feel really hard. You said that twos love really hard. I think twos feel really hard,
Yeah.
in general, and I'm a high feeling anyway from an Enneagram perspective, and that was difficult to navigate as a young kid. I will also say that this behavior started a long time ago for me. I remember I
Yeah.
have, like, keepsakes that my parents had boxed up, and I have them in my basement. My, like, kindergarten report card is like, "She
I
thinks of
gotcha.
others. She's so inclusive." But I have very vivid memories of, like, walking out of a parent-teacher conference, as an example, and them being, "Wow, we're so proud of you for being such a good friend." Oh, okay, that's gonna get me what I need.
Right.
And, my family structure was interesting. My sister's 8 years older than me, so she was going through teenage angst about all of that time when
Yeah.
I'm younger, right? So how do I navigate being a sibling that's that much younger, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and my sister's my best friend today, which is great. She's a 9. But it's fascinating to think back on navigating the environment. So I'll do this to this day where I can walk into a room and pick up a vibe immediately. I can tell who around the room is okay to be there, who is upset, who is excited, who is like it's it is one of the gifts of a 2 is usually we're highly empathetic to the point where we take on other people's feelings sometimes.
Right.
So that's been the hard work for me because I remember doing that as a kid. And the hard work for me now is having a boundary to, I see that you're having that emotion. I see that you're having that. It's not mine,
Right.
nor is it
Right.
mine to fix.
Yeah. I think that's a good topic to maybe dive a little deeper on for twos as well, of that idea that they are absorbing the feelings around them that aren't necessarily theirs.
Mhm.
But then it's distinguishing what is theirs, right? Because I've heard some too say they get so caught in the feeling that they lose track of their, wait, is this my feeling? Do I feel this? And there's really this, they lose themselves in that. So like you said, that's like deeply empathetic. But I think, is there more you can share, an example you can share sort of around that and around being able to set that boundary that might be helpful for someone to better understand how to recognize when that's happening to them?
Yeah, so I can think of what example do I want to use here? Okay, I'll use my husband as an example. I can pick up on his energy. So he's a first responder, right? So in his line of work, he experiences some pretty significant and traumatic events. When he goes through a more traumatic event, when he gets home, I can pick up on where he's at almost immediately. If he doesn't want to talk about it, I
Yeah.
get the vibe. If he is open or needs me to ask some questions, I can pick up on a vibe. So that's an easy one. One that is more challenging for me these days, like in present, is with my children.
Okay.
My 6-year-old, Keegan, he is really hard on himself. He's going through this stage where, like, if he doesn't do it perfect the first time, it's like he's so disappointed in himself and he's so sad. And that is so hard to try to let him sit in because
Okay.
I immediately want to fix it.
Yeah.
I immediately want to be like, no, it's okay. Let me help you. Let me take over
Right.
the situation to fix it.
Yeah.
Where we're at the point now where I have a little shower affirmations card for this kid because I'm like, I need to not like feel this feeling for myself to fix
Right.
it, bro. Um, so that's another one
Right.
that's in present. I would say as a kid, it was the first feelings that I remember picking up most on were sadness.
Okay. That's so
And then
interesting. We're gonna have to unpack the differences of that for at some point because yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Right.
yeah. I remember the very first feelings picking up on being sadness and it feeling really heavy to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh. As a young kid, I remember feeling like, do I walk away? Do I try to make it better? What do I do? And it giving me this kind of impending sense of doom where I'm
Oh,
like,
interesting. Yeah.
we're going to be in this feeling forever, never going to feel better. And so then it translated to me, I think, using that gift to pick up on other things to appeal to and navigate. So what I didn't realize until I knew my number, so with my 2-ness, I can also be manipulative.
Yeah.
So
That's a common.
I use those feelings that I pick up on in a room to try to navigate whatever goal it is that I'm trying to achieve in that conversation.
Yeah. I was gonna say you hit the word, a lot of twos get very triggered by that word, right? And there have been other folks that I've gone through the Enneagram with, and they get their results back from the IEQ 9 test, and there's a line in there about this manipulative behavior, and twos, and almost every single one of them will call that out as something they disagree with upon the first pass of reading their Enneagram results.
Yeah. Ooh, me? I don't do
Yeah,
that.
right.
I'm a
Yeah.
helper.
Yes. I wouldn't manipulate anyone.
I remember getting the ick about that originally. I think I came to you after because there's this element of authority, right? That goes along with it
Mhm.
too. Sometimes and 3 is my second highest number. So towards our next episode, I'll be able to talk a little more about that. But appealing to authority and being like the teacher's pet.
Yep.
That resonates hard with me. And that was my first moment of understanding not only that, but manipulation.
Yeah.
I think I came to you right after. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Ew.
I remember talking about that.
Ew. So it's important, right? Because I think another thing that I am still working on is not using those things as an excuse, but trying to get better about that thing, which is probably why I'm triggered by people who have a lack of integrity.
Yeah, that could
Yeah,
be.
I'm manipulative. No.
Yes. No. I think, and manipulation is a word that often has a really negative connotation, just the way it's used in society and
Yeah.
the way we talk about it. Um, but I think again, everything is inherently neutral. We assign whether it's bad or good, and so there can be times where the manipulative thing is very innocent and isn't hurtful at all.
Sure.
We have a mutual friend who is also a 2, who often will kind of show up and compliment something in some way and then follow that with an ask, right? And it's very innocent and very sweet, but that is like the definition of manipulation, right? Like, I'm going to give you a compliment so that you'll help me. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
she is a master at that though. If there is any
yes.
she is a master and she knows who she is. But yeah, I guess I have a question for you from beginning of Enneagram, right? Where I was asking all kinds of questions and get my number, right? Flash forward
Yeah.
to now being certified and now at this point. Do you see growth? Maybe not necessarily in me or like it could be other people too that start by learning their number. And if they really adopt kind of this method of thinking and really put the work in, do you notice a change to them being more integrated being a little bit more of all 9 numbers?
Yeah, I think obviously everybody's different in how they go through it, but anybody I've worked with over the last few years who've looked at it really as a tool, who haven't looked at it as just sort of an interesting thing or just another personality assessment, people who have adopted it as a tool and part of the language in their life, I have seen most of them grow or integrate better. Sometimes the what it looks like is like a calming of the sort of what was instinctual, habitual patterns of behavior that were kind of driven out of that motivation, where they sort of calm down and they get a little more at peace with themselves in terms of how they are showing up. They can There's also a shifting for people that are kind of constantly in the work of, instead of being really hard on themselves and being like, "Oh, I hate all these things about my number. I hate all these things about, me showing up in this way," to seeing the gifts that they also bring. So, I don't know if that completely answers your question, but for you personally, I think there has definitely been a shift that's happened over the time that I've known you and from the time that you started working with the Enneagram until now, that is towards that, like, acceptance of the gifts that you bring to the table, not just looking at the things that annoy you about your number that you show up in every day, but also there's like a broad you bring a broader perspective, right? Like, it's a more well-rounded sort of view as opposed to maybe just in that kind of typical 2 worldview, if that makes sense.
It does. The reason I ask is because for me, it feels like this genuine curiosity partnered with acceptance,
Yeah,
where I want to know why I do the
yeah,
things that I do. to make sense of it before I can accept it.
Yep.
So I think that the other important thing that I do want to talk about as it relates to twos is there are also twos that I know and we know that I would never have guessed that they were twos. So again, a callback to behaviors versus motivation because
Yeah.
it can
Yeah.
show up so different. So different.
Right.
Uh, Based off of what you learned and what you were rewarded with through those behaviors ultimately to feed that motivation, right?
Right.
But the clarity for me in that knowing other twos and seeing what should be, you know, oh, they're also a two. It feels like it should be a mirror image and it's not.
I think that's a good point overall in the Enneagram. And we are going to get to the point where we talk about some of the other nuances in more detail. But one of the key features or key structures within the Enneagram that makes that nuance is this idea of subtype, right? That can
Mhm.
really kind of change how someone sort of shows the
Mhm.
kind of characteristics of their number. But I think it also goes back to while we have the Enneagram, this podcast is about it. We both love it. We both see it as a tool that's really helped us grow and everything. There's so much nuance to being a human being. There's so much complexity that it's not just as simple as, oh, now I know the number and now I can just like go forward on this path. And so I think that's also worth just pointing out in this to your point of you could put 10 twos in a room and
Mhm.
the only thing that they're going to agree on is that they grew up in a household that rewarded them for being helpful, or that's how they believed they would get love, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Maybe they weren't
Yeah.
rewarded for it, but that
Yeah.
was the thing. Everything else that's going on in their life and the way that they're kind of working through it could be totally different.
Completely. Completely
Yeah.
different. The other thing that maybe it's timing, maybe it's not, is after I had my kids, I certainly wanted to break some patterns of, how I became a two, right? And I mean, I'm sure my kids will have damage just like everybody
It's
else's
like
kid, right?
everybody's kids. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Right.
But for me, it was more important to see how I can try to be the best version of myself for them and how can I help them get comfortable being themselves early
Right.
and accepting their gifts and accepting their shortcomings earlier in life to feel more well-rounded and more secure and more all the things that I wish I was a little bit more of. If there's one bit of feedback that I get consistently and have gotten forever, it's that I lack confidence,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
which is really interesting because I can show up confident. And I think where mostly that comes from is I need to work through things verbally. That's another thing about twos is I need to brain dump and you are often the recipient for all of that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm thinking about this thing and I need you to help me work through it. And I don't know. I've said this. I'll say it again 100,000 times on this podcast. I love a five. It like is I think that yin yang thing for me where I'm like, you guys are so thoughtful and have great questions, and I need to get this out.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can read like I need validation. So I think that's where that bit of feedback comes from. Is well, you should be more confident. You know this. All of those things, and
Right.
like, well, wait, I know. I know. I just, like, need to say it.
Right.
So, it's a little bit of that. I think the other thing that comes up when I think about maybe tracking towards how I became a 2 is, and it relates to confidence. I never felt like the smartest one in the room, ever. And I think it was because um, I was regularly challenged from, like, picture you doing your homework and then, like, a parent next to you. Like, that's what I remember, and being like, "Oh my god, I don't know it. I don't know. I don't know," and being super nervous about that. My sister, still to this day, like, wicked smart, so
Yeah.
smart. And school was not my thing until I got to college and was paying for it.
It's funny how that
Uh,
works, right? Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of being bad at school. I always had friends, and I was doing things, like, with my friends, and that
Yeah.
was my priority when I was younger.
Yeah.
That and playing soccer and doing all of these other things that I did when I was younger, but school was not it. And that still to this day is where my lack of confidence comes from, even in a working environment. I never feel like the smartest person in the room. So that's actually the work that I'm doing on a deeper level, is getting more comfortable with, my strengths and my abilities and owning them for what they are,
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
instead of not feeling smart enough or not feeling good enough, or, maybe I'll be good enough if I do X, Y, or Z.
Right. Right.
Which is kind of sad if you think about it, right? If you think about it too, in the way that they want to receive love and the things that they feel like they have to do to get it, it's sad if you think about it.
I think every number has like a little bit of that where when you look at that, this is the belief that they took on. And
Mhm.
I think every person has it to some extent. And for twos, it's the I'm not good enough. I am not enough without being helpful. I only am valued for what I can provide for another person.
Mhm.
And so that is really sad when you think about it. But we talked about last week with ones, right? Theirs comes from if I'm not perfect
Mhm.
enough. Like I have no value unless I'm perfect. So every number has that thing. And when you think about it, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so the the all of the work is around how do you separate from that and see yourself as valuable just because you're a human being. Just because you exist, you
Right.
have value and are valued, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm excited for when we talk tri-types to some extent, because I think with my tri-type, it kind of doubles down some
Yeah.
aspects of my number.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, so for those who need a teaser for many a episode from now, it's a thinks like, feels like, acts like.
Looks like, yeah. Stick with us. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get
Stick,
there.
stick with us.
Yeah.
I think for me, the two-ness was validating to learn about, when you really take a look at the value of relationships and the value that I place in those relationships. Because there's inherent risk, right? With other people, and if you give them a piece of you, if you are a friend to them, if you love them, any of those things,
Right.
there's risk in giving a piece of that to someone else.
Right.
And if I think about why I love a 5, that might be part of it, where the energy that's given feels reciprocated from the 5s in my life, because they see how much I've given to that, and it's not lost on them. I think that the risk in the two-ness, where you really where I get anxiety is in those relationships, even the people that I really don't even have like outstanding relationships with. It's like, are they mad at me? Do they hate me? Why do they hate me? Here's a really good story about that. So there was a girl
Yeah.
way back, like we're talking like, I don't know, I was probably in high school. I didn't even go to the same school as her. Okay.
Yeah.
She hated my guts to the core. I think I had said all of like 3 words to her in my entire
Right.
life. I ran into her at a baby shower one time. And I was like, "Oh my god." She was still like daggers, and I'm like, "I need to get out of here. She hates me. I can't fix it. There's no way I can." And
Right.
still to this day, if you were to ask me, "Who really disdains you?" I'd number 1, that person. And it, like, sticks with me that hard because 'cause I've never
Yeah.
had that, like, at least not to my face.
Right. I think, yeah. It's
So,
interesting how strong that still feels for you, right? Like,
oh my
yeah.
god, I
Mhm.
it feels so strong still.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would be remiss to not talk about is when there is conflict, I need it fixed yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday. Like, if I sense that my husband is mad at me, I'm like, "Let's talk about it right now. Let's do it. Here we go. We're gonna get through it. We're gonna solve this now." And he's an 8, so he's real comfortable sitting in some discomfort. I'm like,
Yeah.
"I'm mad at you, but are you mad at me? How can you be mad at me? I'm mad at you."
I think that goes to the other thing that often shows up pretty hard for twos and can be a reason why sometimes people think they're a two, but there is to that point, like this people pleasing thing that happens pretty hard for twos. And I think every number has their version of it. I have my version of it, right? So it's not to sort of be like twos are the only one, but to that, are you mad at me? And the concern about the relationship and
Mhm.
if it's broken and if something's that's very real for twos. I think I don't know a two who doesn't talk about that worry of whether or not someone's mad at them or did they say something wrong or did the fact that you only text a one-word answer back mean that I didn't say something that you wanted to hear or what, right? Like all of that sort of
Yeah.
story that they spin up about what something means.
Yeah. I had one, like, in a I think in a text you sent me. I think it was in a text you sent me, you're like, uh, I don't even remember where it was, but it was like a one-word response like, "Okay." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "We have to record around my kid's nap time, and that's not convenient, and she probably hates me, and this is so hard."
And that's like the difference in my like five brain. I'm like,
Look up.
okay, it's fine. Okay. And also I don't want to use any extra energy, so I'm gonna say as little as possible.
And I'm like, "Oh my god, this is all about me because it's around my kid's nap time. How selfish of me."
Oh gosh, yeah. Such a two.
Oh, it's so ridiculous, but those are the things. It's those things where I'll I'll do it with Landon sometimes too, where, like, he'll be walking around and I'll be like, "He's walking loud. Are you mad?
He's walking loud.
Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
Like, "Why does something always have to be wrong?" I'm like, "It doesn't." Or is it? One funny thing, a friend that both of us know told me a story about how so his mom is a 2, and he had gone on a vacation, and it had been a few days since they had talked, and his mom texted him and said, everything okay? I have this sinking feeling that something's wrong or that something happened. So it's like if things are good in a two world, you go seeking the problem
Problem.
that you need to save or you need to like do something about.
Something. Well, and it's that anticipation that comes back to that anticipation of someone else's needs, right? They
100%.
something must be wrong. I must need to fix it because whatever the story is.
I think my oldest 6-year-old had a speech delay because I knew what he needed before he knew what he needed, and he never had to ask for it. I think I did that. I think I did that.
We do it.
Um, but yeah, I think that going a bit back to my kids, it's like I I also have this like intense mama bear thing that comes out. Not just with my kids, but with my friends. Like I am a fierce like protector of my humans. The other twos that I have in my life, our mutual friend that's a two, she also has
Mhm.
that. That's the because I think that friend and I are both things like a six. So that might be a little loyal skeptic energy that's coming in.
Right.
But if it involves any one of my friends or there's a negative thing that's said about somebody I care about, I'm the first one to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait a minute.
Right.
And I remember that from back when I was a kid. Like if there was somebody being mistreated on the playground, like, or if someone was, you know, being a bully or if somebody was like I was always somehow even if I wasn't acting on it, I was having a really strong feeling about it and not saying it.
Yeah. I think those are amazing things and with twos and I would say the, other twos that I have in my life that's a similar, that really strong feeling, particularly around kids. I think definitely shows up. Now, I think every parent probably has some of that,
Yeah.
but it's really strong. I notice it more with my friends who are twos, the way they talk about their kids and wanting to help their kids through issues or problems or this deep desire to help them be successful in the world.
Yeah.
I'm not a parent, so maybe that's just like a normal thing, or maybe it's just that the twos really talk about it more than other parents. Yeah.
Yeah. But we need to help them. It's our job.
Right.
Help them.
Yeah.
Time's so not
Um,
level.
right. Hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's the need to let them do the kid thing they need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with the two being a two and all of that and the relationships, we've touched on the verbal processing, which is typical for twos, the strong relationship building, some of the less healthy traits within twos, building confidence, all of that. Is there anything, you feel like is like a key sort of idea or whatever that you would want people to walk away with that they're new to the Enneagram as a tool and not sure, like, am I too? Like, being helpful resonates with me, but is that all it takes?
Yeah. I think that if there is any, really strong thing about it too, it's that self-sacrifice to an unhealthy level. I think it's the forgetting of about your own things that you need to do for yourself to the point where, you get lost in it sometimes. And I think the easiest way to tell that, right, is when, you really look at the people that you find closest in your circle, what's the immediate thought that you have around those human beings? I think for me, that was some of the initial work that I did when I learned about my two-ness is how do I show up in
Yeah.
those relationships? Am I consistently putting forth a ton of effort? Am I doing all of these things that we've talked about throughout the podcast? Am I doing those things with the closest people in my life? And 100%, yes. I think that was my confirmation moment of I do things that will inconvenience myself to do something for someone else.
Yeah.
My husband is a great truth teller when it comes to that because I'll like offer to do something for someone. He's like, "What are you doing?"
What's
Or he
wrong with
like will
you? Yeah.
advocate for us to be like, "We're not doing that."
Yeah.
What do you mean we're not doing that? I have to say no. I think the other
Yeah.
thing is that there may be this feeling for twos, I know I have this, is where I feel guilty about saying yes and guilty about saying no.
Oh, say more about that.
If I agree to do something so quickly, if I agree to do something so quickly because my instinct is to do something for that other person, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Or I don't have time to do that. I just overcommitted myself.
Yeah.
Um, I'll feel guilty for saying yes. The saying no, setting boundaries is the other thing that I would want people to take away from this is like if boundaries are really hard,
Mhm.
you might consider, everyone should take the test. Everyone should take an
Yeah.
Enneagram test to learn about themselves. But if there is something that is tugging at you that's like, I have a really hard time setting boundaries, probably a two. I mean, I the unhealthy way that that shows up for me, because that's still something I'm working on,
Yeah.
is I will disassociate. If I say no, I will have to rationalize it in my head for a brief moment and then just completely disconnect from it.
Yeah.
And I'm not moving through any of the feelings I'm having about that.
Right. Just real
I
quick, cut it off.
I'm gonna shove that under a rug and deal with that
Yeah.
later.
Yes.
Or not.
Or not. Then it'll just come up in some sideways
Throw up
thing.
in some other thing that I'll have to work through with Brandon at Evolved Athlete and be like,
Yeah.
I didn't deal with that. But something I read the other morning also is something that I wanted to share. So I've been reading the 12 Rules of Life for way too long now because it's very long, but by Jordan Peterson. And something that was in the book on rule number 11 was we experience
You're
almost,
almost done.
I am
So sorry,
almost,
not to interrupt. You're
yes,
almost done. Rule number
rule,
11. Almost done. Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
almost,
Go ahead. Yes.
we experience almost all emotions that make life deep and engaging as a consequence of moving successfully towards something deeply desired and valued.
You need to read that again.
We experience almost all emotions that make life deep and engaging as a consequence of moving successfully towards something deeply desired and valued.
Yeah.
Said differently, like, are you measuring yourself as winning or losing based on what you value or your
Mm.
motivation? And for me, that's the human beings I have in my life
Okay.
and the value in those relationships and the intensity of those relationships sometimes.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
There's a lot. There's a lot in that. I mean, we could probably have a whole nother podcast episode on just
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
quote. But yeah, it's very interesting that, you know, association of the feelings, towards success and where they come from. And yeah, there's a lot there. That I'll have to process. I don't have an immediate example or
Yeah.
reaction.
I'm going to
Yeah.
text. I would like to leave a parting message with the twos that are listening, and
Yeah.
something that I'm working on as a two. I don't like to use recovering two because I kind of love my two-ness now. I've
Right.
gotten cozy with that, all the prickly parts too. So there's value in not just the people that you surround yourself with, but the value that you have in yourself. Like, treat yourself like you would one of those other people that you hold
Right.
so dear in your life. And you'll start to feel the benefits of that tenfold. It's true what they say, like, you can't take care of other people unless you take care of yourself.
Yep.
And I've always just kind of thought that's like a bunch of bullshit until I started really trying to understand where this is coming from, and then starting to adjust and become more integrated and more open. And so for the twos out there, or the people who have twos in their life, that's the other thing I do want to touch on before we wrap up, is like, the best thing that you can do for the two in your life is just to see them
Yeah.
and help them understand, even if they're getting it wrong, the story that they're telling themselves.
Yeah.
I use that all the time now, where I'm like, the story I'm telling myself is this,
Right.
usually to try to anticipate a need, sometimes incorrectly, or I'm trying to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And the the value in being seen and appreciated is going to make the two in your life feel more secure and stable, and they will show up as the best version of themselves.
For sure. I think that's a great point and a great ask, right? Great reminder for people who aren't twos but have twos
Mhm.
around them. Yeah.
I
Awesome.
do have a question for you. What is your favorite thing about a two?
Oh, shoot.
Or
I
is it
don't know
fun?
if I have I don't know if I have a single favorite thing. There are certain things that I find fascinating that twos are can do that I just I don't do inherently. So I have a friend that I met through kind of the triathlon running endurance space. And I remember early on just being fascinated the way she could move through a group of people and touch every single one of them in some way, and just create these little moments of meaning with each separate individual in a large group. Like there might be 20, 25 people. And just watching her be able to do that and navigate through all these different people and personalities and remember things about their kids, their dogs, their goals, their work, whatever it is. And I just remember watching her and being like, I can't even imagine being able to do that. I would land in a large group of people and try to connect with one or two others. There's no way I'm talking to 25 people at a party. Never going to happen. So there are things like that that just amaze me because it's stuff I would never consider doing. And I think the way that twos up on feelings sort of just immediately, there's not necessarily a bunch of thought behind it. It's just they know. And I think in some different friendships, some, folks you and I kind of share friendships with, where that's been good for me because they don't let me get away with when I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I'm fine. They know they can pick up on the feeling that's behind that, and they don't let that just be the blanket answer. And so that's been good for me too, to have people that sort of push the envelope with well, I don't believe you. So yeah. So I don't know that those are favorite things, but I think I think there's amazing gifts
Yeah.
with the twos. They also always want to see the best in everyone.
Yeah.
And so that could be a favorite thing, right? They're really good at being like, yeah, but all this wonderful things about this person or this situation, whatever it is.
Right. Right. And I love that call out because I'm married to an 8 and he's like, there is evil in this world. And I'm like, everyone means so well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, resident 2, lots of 2s in our lives, appreciate
Fun.
each and every one of them for their gifts and every number in our lives, as always. But anything you want to wrap up with?
Well, I think so. Today we did like the first kind of dive into twos. We will definitely talk about twos more. One, we know a lot of twos. Also, Tana being a two, well, there'll probably be 2 examples that come up regularly. But I think our next episode after this, we're going to deep dive into threes and the motivation behind threes and the competitive achiever. So that should be fun. Yeah. And I think otherwise, if you're looking to connect, Tana mentioned it before, all the places you can find us. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. So it's at Enneagram Adventure for all of those. If you want to drop us an email because you have a question or a thought, you can do that it's enneagramadventure@gmail.com. I think that's all the things. Did I miss anything? We'll put all that in the show notes also.
Yeah. No, you hit it on the head. Follow along, stay with us. We're getting through these first, basics part of each number, and then we'll do deep dives. Hopefully have some folks on the show and have more awesome
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Do
Yeah.
some interviews. Yeah. We'll probably have to do a whole series too. So we have a lot of them that'll want to be
We
on
have
here.
a lot. We have a lot.
Yeah. Or we could do a panel. Oh, it could be a panel.
Oh my
discussion.
gosh. That's so
Yeah.
good. Oh, everybody, hey, but you know what? Nobody would talk over each other because they're like, no, you go.
Right.
No, by all means, you go
It's-
first.
yeah. You go
Say it all
first.
the time because we have a few twos that we share, and you're like, you guys are trying to out to each other.
Yes. Yeah.
I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. All right.
All right. All right. Well, hang with us and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.
See ya.